Am I the Ahole for telling my mother to regard me as a basic housekeeper from today onward instead of her daughter? I apologize for the lengthy message, but this situation requires considerable context, which I will endeavor to condense. To provide some background, I was not raised by either of my parents. My father is a habitual cheater who brought random women into the marital home, prompting my mother to leave him about 2 years after my birth. She harbored resentment towards my father, and since I look like him and remind her of him, she left me in the care of relatives during my childhood, occasionally visiting every other month to catch up. However, in reality, she often called me various hurtful names, berated me for resembling my father, and referred to me as a demon child whenever I became upset. My relatives moved me through 11 different households, some of which confiscated my toys and clothes, and fed me different meals than those given to their own children. In other homes, I faced groping and molestation by older cousins, and I had no one to confide in about my experiences. Whenever I attempted to speak to my mother, she always dismissed my concerns. Throughout school, I did not have friends and never had cousins who liked me enough to spend time with me. I developed people-pleasing tendencies to keep others around, driven by a fear of being abandoned and alone, as I was often left home alone by myself, with people even forgetting to pick me up from school or provide me with proper meals at times. My relationship with my mother was non-existent during my childhood. I merely knew she was my mother, even asking several times if I had been adopted, because I never felt a connection with her. Even as an infant, I was told I had to be bottle-fed earlier than usual because I refused to let her breastfeed me. I was one of those children who matured quickly, learning to do things independently, such as walking, talking, doing laundry, cooking, as well as basic skills like reading and writing, which led to my early enrollment in kindergarten. I assume this was the reason why people often regarded me as an easy child who does not require attention or assistance. Since the age of 9, I have attempted to take my own life at ages 12, 14, and 16. I was initially diagnosed with major depressive disorder at 12, but my family did not take my suicide attempts seriously and did not believe in mental health issues. Consequently, I did not complete my course of treatment or receive any psychosocial support from a professional. During high school, I endured severe bullying, especially in the boarding house where I lived after being taken advantage of and experiencing physical and verbal abuse at my aunt's house. They made up rules prohibiting me from sitting on their sofas or dining chairs. I was not allowed to use hot water, watch television, or use the computer. I spent my time in the room, attending school and doing house chores. After my last suicide attempt, I made a vow to stop hating myself and redirected my anger toward those I believed had wronged me. I severed ties with my entire paternal family in the following years. Unfortunately, by the time I enrolled in university, my parents returned to my life to dictate what I should study. My original plan was to study abroad, as I had been accepted to a small institution in Italy and had applied for financial aid in an effort to leave it all behind. Sadly, my parents refused to let me go, and I was enrolled in the university where my father works. When the administration discovered our relationship, I lost my on-campus job and my financial aid, despite the fact that my father had never financially supported me since the day I was born. My mother often lamented how she never got to enjoy her money, stating that she felt too young when she had me. She had me when she was 32, but she didn't want to pay for my tuition because she had more important matters to attend to. With no one willing to support me financially, my mother offered an alternative. I could apply for a study loan from the bank in her name to pursue something I truly wanted to do. However, she misled everyone into believing that she applied for a larger amount than what we actually signed at the bank. I later learned that she requested more money from the bank for her personal use, but now she claims it is my fault that she incurred that debt when I returned. I expressed my desire to leave the country, and when I was accepted into a university in Lusaka, it turned out there was an error in their system, meaning I had to re-enroll the following year in order to take the exam. My mother would not hear of it, and insisted that I return home and resume my studies at the university I was initially enrolled in. However, upon my return, no one wanted to pay for my education once again. Exhausted from pleading, I chose to seek employment instead. I secured a part-time job where I received training, and after several promotions, I attained a supervisory role. Unfortunately, the demands of the workplace made it impossible to study and work simultaneously. My workplace was a toxic environment rife with nepotism and constant disrespect due to my age. Colleagues felt I was too young for the position I held and made it their mission to either have me fired or to drive me to quit voluntarily. Compounding matters, my roommate was very controlling, making my life at home unbearable until my parents finally decided to divorce 26 years later after subjecting me to a painful childhood that still haunts me. I spent years pleading for their love, for them to visit me more frequently, spending days to weeks in the hospital without them ever coming. Neither of my parents ever attended any of my parent-teacher meetings or school awards to cheer me on. It was merely years of rejection, subjected to ridicule in homes where I was reminded I was an unwanted nuisance. Throughout these years, despite the challenges, I met incredible individuals whom I could finally call friends. Although some of them certainly took advantage of me, there was one who stood by me, supporting me during the difficult years and encouraging me to pursue therapy. During my first visit to the therapist my friend recommended, I was referred to a specialist, psychiatrist, who once again diagnosed me with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder with bipolar traits. I was prescribed medication immediately with mandatory weekly sessions with a psychologist. I had lost all sense of myself, and to this day, I struggle to engage in any of my hobbies. Although I function well by doing chores and trying to stay active, my mental health has suffered tremendously. I could not take care of my personal hygiene, cook, clean nothing. I remained stuck in bed for weeks, with friends rotating in and out to help care for me. I could not confide in my mother about my mental health struggles because, as I last recalled, she reacted to my suicide attempts with laughter. However, in front of others, she would cry about how her only child is suffering. Due to my mental health issues, I found it difficult to be present at work, which led colleagues to falsify documents and claims that resulted in my termination without a proper trial or hearing. Essentially, they had someone else in mind for my position and moved quickly to remove me without following proper protocols. They also entirely cut me off so that I could not contact the national office for help. After being assaulted by my roommate, losing my job, my pension, and my savings, I decided to return home to reconnect with my mother, but I learned I am still the child she regrets having. To everyone, family, coworkers, neighbors, and friends, she presents herself as the ideal mother because she supposedly dotes on me. The truth is, I know her as a gossiping woman who loves to talk about herself, always playing the victim for sympathy, yet immediately turning around to say the most hurtful things when it is just the two of us while claiming she didn't mean it, or she just has a rough-sounding voice. Her routine involves saying hurtful things, then attempting to make amends with unnecessary shopping, only to revert to being snarky and cruel in a few days. My mother is the type of person who refuses to acknowledge my pain. Whenever I cry, she cries louder. If I have a headache, suddenly her headache is worse than mine. She tells people she cares so much about me that when I cannot eat or sleep, she cannot either, while in actuality, she would be eating heartily and sleeping contentedly. I used to have regular check-ins with a psychologist since moving home, but I ceased going because I felt uncomfortable relying on my mother to pay for the sessions, as she believed she was entitled to sit in on my appointments. At one point, she even fainted during one of my sessions. Doctors felt sympathy for her because she portrayed herself as the concerned mother with her only child, and she played her role exceptionally well. Whatever was discussed in my sessions would later be used against me. On days when I struggle to get out of bed, she comments on my laziness while she does everything. She forced me to cut contact with all my friends and even asked me to change my phone number. I have confided in her about my past. I started smoking cigarettes at 12, developed a high alcohol tolerance over the years as I drowned my sorrows in liquor, and 2 years ago, I was introduced to marijuana, which has generally helped reduce my panic attacks from occurring every other day to once a month. I did not become a regular user, but she uses this against me, often insulting me by referencing my past. We have recently reconciled, but this morning she woke me up with the same old accusations, even though we had been sleeping in the same room, in the same bed, and it seems I was the only one thinking we had turned over a new leaf. I became extremely upset, but I stopped myself from crying and vowed never to shed tears over her again. I told her to stop considering me her daughter and to see me as nothing more than a house help from that moment on. She constantly uses the phrase, "I'm your mother," to excuse her behavior and disguise it as a mother's concern, but she knows what she is doing. She frequently feigns illnesses to gain sympathy from others, making them believe it is my fault to the point that rumors have circulated within the family that I will be the reason for her demise. I am not allowed to work. I attempted to volunteer in various towns, but she relentlessly called and sent emotional blackmailing voice notes on WhatsApp during the early hours of the morning around 4 or 5 a.m., fully aware that it would compel me to return home. I am her only child, which is the sole reason she clings to me because, without me, she technically has no one to rely on for assistance as she ages. However, I have been contemplating ways to fake my death to escape from these people who do not want me around for my own benefit. I cannot afford to fall into another depressive episode. I have been cut off from everyone who cares about me because my mother disapproves of me getting too friendly or close with others. She concocts all kinds of stories and tells nearly everyone in her contact list that I used to be a psychotic patient and that she only acts as she does to protect me. For the record, I was only ever on antidepressants and never took antipsychotic medication in my life. And to clarify further, being on antipsychotic drugs does not invalidate a person's right to choose or give anyone the right to try to control them. Now everyone views me as this weak person incapable of making my own decisions, and my mother is justified in controlling me in this manner. I am 27, and I have made up my mind that this is the last year I will attempt to repair this relationship. I plan to leave before my 28th birthday next year, allowing myself enough time to find someone to replace me for handling chores and other matters since my mother is getting older. But honestly, I do not think old age is a valid reason for being a terrible parent. Story 2. Left home after a massive family fight, I finally saw my childhood clearly. Abuse, neglect, and emotional damage. Time to break free. Am I the asshole for going no contact with my parents and sister? There are numerous factors that led me to make this difficult decision. I am a 21-year-old woman who was recently forced to leave my parents' home following a significant argument. I will divide this story into two distinct sections. The first will detail my past experiences living with my family and the issues that ultimately culminated in my being thrown out, and the second will recount the fight that triggered my departure. 1. I have lived with my parents my entire life. I once believed I had a wonderful childhood, but as I matured, my perspective shifted. Now that I am finally free and out of their house, I recognize that my childhood was far from ideal. I am aware that others have had it significantly worse than I did, and I do not intend to exaggerate my experiences for sympathy. Throughout my upbringing, particularly until I was around 7 or 8 years old, my father struggled with alcoholism and was abusive towards my mother, both physically and verbally. I would often hide around the corner, ensuring things weren't too terrible in case I needed to protect my mom. I was terrified of my father when he drank, and thankfully, he eventually quit drinking and has remained sober. My mother has always been present, but her love has consistently been conditional. She would shower me with affection, employ the silent treatment, throw objects at me in an attempt to hit me, physically assault me, spit in my face, and use hurtful language. She repeatedly expressed her regret for having me, labeling me a mistake and urging me to run away whenever I made a mistake or upset her in any way. For instance, when I was 6 or 7, I accidentally unplugged her printer. Fearing her reaction, I informed her, and she simply told me to plug it back in. The following day, when she attempted to print and it didn't work, it was because the printer had disconnected from the Wi-Fi due to my actions and she hadn't reconnected it. She then screamed at me, blaming me for ruining her printer and berating me for being a terrible child. She expressed wishes that she had aborted me, continued yelling, and labeled me with various insults. After her tirade, she sent me to my room without food or water, prohibiting me from leaving, even to use the restroom. The next day, when I came out, she ignored me, refusing to say anything, including "I love you." However, the day after that, she started talking to me again as if nothing had happened, made me breakfast, took me shopping, and professed her love for me. This reflects my childhood from ages 0 to 12. During my teenage years, the situation worsened. I was homeschooled following elementary school due to an illness I experienced at the time. Fortunately, I am much better now, but I spent most of my time at home, often isolated from friends. Even when I managed to make friends, I rarely had the opportunity to see them due to chores, homework, or other restrictions. Between the ages of 15 and 16, I had a boyfriend who lived with us and was severely abusive toward me physically, emotionally, sexually, and spiritually, all under my parents' roof. My mother claims she was unaware, but I have difficulty believing this. It is hard to ignore someone screaming and crying and being thrown against a wall, especially when she was just 2 doors down. After we broke up, I disclosed everything to my mother, and she appeared sad. However, about 6 months after my boyfriend left, I discovered messages between her and him in which she expressed how much she missed him, loved him, and considered him like a son, and even suggested meeting for lunch. This devastated me. Whenever I have discussed my mental health issues, including depression, my mother's reaction has been the same. She barely acknowledges me, questions what I have to be depressed about, insists that her experiences were far worse, and accuses me of implying she is a bad mother. When I have confronted her about her negative behavior, she gaslights me, shifts the blame onto me, and refuses to acknowledge any of her faults. During arguments, she often does everything possible to present herself in a positive light while casting me in a negative one. She cannot accept the thought of being in the wrong. From the ages of 8 to 21, I had to help care for my siblings, including helping my other sibling take care of the younger ones. I have a younger brother who is disabled, requires therapy, uses diapers, and cannot walk. We lived in a 2-story house with my brother downstairs and my mother upstairs. She would go weeks without seeing him unless we brought him upstairs, and often months would pass without her changing a single diaper or providing him with therapy. It was always my responsibility to care for him. I frequently attended his doctor's appointments alongside my brother because my mother did not know enough to speak on his behalf. She consistently neglected her responsibilities at home, and I ended up cleaning the entire house, including my parents' bedroom and bathroom. I handled all the laundry, cooking, doctor visits, grocery shopping, and yard work. In the end, she never acknowledged my efforts, frequently claiming I didn't do enough or did nothing at all. That sums up my experience, though I am aware of many details that I have omitted. 2. The final explosive argument occurred as follows. My boyfriend, 21, who is still with me, took my sister, 13, to Walmart. When they were checking out and walking out, my sister began insisting that they show the receipt. My boyfriend responded that they were fine, and despite my sister continuing to press the issue, the Walmart employee simply shrugged them off. My boyfriend reiterated that they were fine and attempted to leave. My sister then accused him of being a bully and complained about his behavior, prompting my boyfriend to respond with, "Says you." My sister became extremely upset and returned to my boyfriend's truck, where my mother was waiting. She climbed into the vehicle, sobbing to my mother, claiming he was cruel, abandoned her, and was causing her anxiety while painting him as the villain. I want to clarify that I do not blindly defend my boyfriend simply because of our relationship. I believe in calling out behavior regardless of who is at fault. My mother was furious with my boyfriend, and when he tried to explain the situation from his perspective, she interrupted him and asserted how she thought it had happened. When he voiced his concerns regarding my sister, such as her being rude and overbearing, my mother became infuriated and refused to speak with him for the rest of the night. The following day, I spoke with her about the incident, and she was still upset with my boyfriend, claiming he had no right to comment on my sister's behavior and labeling him as insensitive, rude, immature, and abusive. She alleged he was abusive towards me, citing a light tap he gave on my arm to see through an intersection when he was driving and a moment when he was snappy with me. For context, he did not push me, he merely tapped my arm to have a clear view. Additionally, we had not slept much the night before, and we were exposed to cold, windy, and rainy weather. He wasn't the only one who was irritable that day. Above all, he is the gentlest and calmest person I have ever been with and has never intentionally harmed me in any way. When I told her that he is not abusive, she dismissed my words. I then suggested that we, meaning my parents, sister, boyfriend, and I, need to sit down and talk about what had happened and address the various issues at hand. For context regarding my sister and boyfriend, he has always been supportive of her, joked with her, purchased her gifts, and taken her out. However, it was never sufficient in her eyes. She often complained to our mother when things didn't go her way, and my parents consistently sided with her, never listening to his side. He would apologize and attempt to adjust to her expectations, but it was never good enough for her or my parents. My sister is treated as the golden child. She faces no consequences and is never held accountable. If she doesn't get her desires, she cries to our parents, who then bend to her will. My mother cannot comprehend her behavior, and she becomes angry when anyone attempts to discuss it. My mother agreed to the conversation, scheduling it for the next day as she had stated. However, as night fell, she accused us of avoiding the discussion. When I reminded her of her promise, she denied ever saying that and blamed me for evading the conversation. Following 2 more days of arguing, I suggested that both parties were to blame for the incident at Walmart, asserting that my sister had overreacted and that my boyfriend's response did not warrant calling him immature. My mother's fury at my lack of support for her and my sister intensified, and she accused me of having an attitude. Keep in mind that I did not raise my voice or curse. I maintained a calm tone. She yelled at me, claiming I was betraying the family, choosing my boyfriend over my sister, and berating me as a major disappointment. She repeated that I was no longer part of the family or her daughter. As I was about to leave for work, she ordered me to pack a bag, stating that I would not be welcome back after my shift and that she would inform me when I could collect my belongings. When the time came to retrieve my things, they offered a chance for discussion, stipulating that my boyfriend and I would need to apologize for everything and acknowledge our supposed wrongdoings for us to stay. In light of the previous week's events, how they disregarded my concerns, and their tendency to twist my words, I declined to have a conversation, explaining that it would be fruitless since they refused to listen. They aimed to have me and my boyfriend apologize for everything, which neither of us was willing to do. Consequently, I packed my belongings and left. Since then, every interaction with them has been confrontational. They consistently blame me, claim I am not family, and label me with derogatory names. When I returned to collect more items, I discovered that I had been removed from everything, including my life insurance policy. They called me a disgusting person for choosing a boy over family. I managed to retrieve my dog from them after involving the police. They insisted I come alone, stating that if I brought someone, I would not receive my dog. I refused, insisting on bringing a police escort. They reacted by claiming I was being excessive, asserting that everyone would know my true nature and what I had done to them. My father even questioned what had caused me to become so bitter, citing I had fallen from their good graces. I simply replied that I would bring an escort for my dog. When I arrived with the police, they acted overly friendly, giving me my dog and offering a meal for that night, apparently trying to maintain a positive image. Since that day, I have cut off all contact with them and refused to communicate further. My mother has been speaking to our entire family about how terrible I am, alleging that I chose a boy over my sister and labeling me as abusive, among other accusations. While my mother has taken care of me, loved me, albeit conditionally, and provided for me, my father has also contributed to my upbringing. For those wondering about my father's role in all this, he is either working or quietly observing everything, agreeing with everything my mother says. When he does speak during arguments, his comments are often cruel and exaggerated in an attempt to impress my mother. This summarizes my situation. While I have not included every detail, the main points are conveyed. Do you believe I am in the wrong here? Am I overreacting? Story 3. Ayo, if I don't want to talk to my mom. Let me begin by stating that my mother, female, 65, is a remarkable person. She has done things occasionally that lead me to believe I genuinely want to communicate with her, but it is never consistent, nor does it even closely compare to how she interacts with my sister. Since I, female, 23, became a teenager, I have consistently felt like I am in second place compared to my older sister, female, 44. I moved out at 20 because we argued frequently, almost every day, and I realized that moving out would be beneficial for our relationship. While it has improved, it is still not as strong as it could be. Here are a few examples that have been painful for me to reflect upon. Whenever I am out with my mother, she somehow always brings up my sister. She had such a difficult time growing up that I need to do various things for her. You are so fortunate to have your father because your sister did not. It feels as if I cannot even enjoy quality time with my mother because she is too focused on my sister. My mother is constantly, and I mean consistently, taking care of my nephew, male, 11. My sister is a single mother, with absolutely no animosity towards her, and I understand that she needs assistance occasionally with her son, as it must be extremely challenging to manage that alone. However, my sister has a boyfriend and spends the night at his home about 2 to 3 times each week while my mother watches my nephew. This arrangement has been ongoing for approximately 2 to 3 years. I have expressed to my sister that this arrangement is unfair to my mother, as she has her own life and her own husband to attend to. Honestly, I don't think she cares. One day, perhaps last year, I told my mother that I hoped when I have my child she would provide the same level of support to them as she does for my sister's child. She responded, "Oh yeah, but you'll be married, so you won't need my help." Why on earth would you say that to your daughter? 2 years ago, we were on a family vacation, and my nephew was openly disrespectful toward my mother. I corrected him, and my mother and sister ganged up on me, claiming I should not speak to him that way or correct him. I told my sister that he had disrespected our mother, and she was allowing it, which is why he believes he can behave that way all the time. Naturally, my mother sided with my sister, leading to a huge blow-up argument, and I left the vacation early. What hurt the most was that she sent a picture in the family group chat of my nephew crying, along with my mother and sister in tears, standing by the door. I felt as if she was attempting to guilt me into staying and made me feel bad for standing up for her. Before I moved out, and while I was still not working, I was very enthusiastic about decorating my dream room. For context, we live in a major city where my father earns a substantial income, so financial constraints were not an issue. I asked if I could go to a craft store and purchase artificial flowers to decorate a mirror. My goal was a floor-length mirror with a flower border. My mother agreed, gave me her card, and set a budget of $100. I went in and spent exactly $100. The following week, she started demanding the $100 back. She was aware that I had no money, so why would she even offer to buy me things if she knew I was broke? During the most recent family vacation, I wanted to leave on Wednesday when they planned to leave on Thursday. I desired one day to readjust before returning to work. I informed my mother on Tuesday that my boyfriend, male, 24, and I would depart on Wednesday around 1 p.m. The drive home is 5 hours, and I'm the only one who can drive, so we would arrive around 6 p.m., just after sunset. My mother expressed her disappointment 4 times over the course of 10 hours. The irony is that my sister also wanted to leave on Wednesday, and that was met with no issue. Yet, when I wish to leave on Wednesday, my mother is disappointed. At breakfast, this escalated into a passive-aggressive argument, and my boyfriend and I went upstairs to cool off since we were both upset. My mother called me, and I informed her that I would not be attending the next activity and that they could enjoy themselves. She accused me of being selfish, disrespectful, and ruining the entire family vacation. I retorted that she was being rude, and I hung up. She then texted my boyfriend, asking what was happening and to come downstairs to confront me. Why would she say that to him? It was incredibly rude and confrontational. The next thing I knew, they were knocking on my door, pretending to cry and trying to barge into the room where my boyfriend and I were. She claimed she did nothing wrong and asked what she had done. I slammed the door in her face. They blamed my father for not forcing us to stay. They only wanted their way and rushed my father through the one thing he wanted to do while there, all because they were not enjoying themselves. Since that incident, my mother has not contacted me, either by call or text, for about 4 days, but my father confirmed that she has spoken to my sister multiple times a day and has visited her house several times as well. My mother is constantly criticizing my job. I am incredibly proud of my work. I earn a little over $4,000 a month, yet she continually tells me to leave that job without explaining why. In contrast, my father proudly carries my business cards in his wallet and hands them out whenever he sees fit, always bragging about me. It makes me feel special. In my mother's eyes, however, because my sister has a career, I will never measure up, even though we roughly earn the same amount annually. My father, male, 59, is the complete opposite. He is always willing to listen, proud of my accomplishments, and never hesitates to help me when I need financial assistance or support in any situation. He loves talking to me and backs me up when my mother and sister are being difficult. I will be heartbroken when my father passes away. He is my best friend. I have previously communicated to my mother how her treatment of me, in comparison to my sister, is profoundly hurtful. She assured me that it is not the case and that she loves me dearly. I know she cares for me, but I don't believe she actually likes me, and that pains me deeply. I have reached the conclusion that our relationship will likely never improve unless she seeks therapy. I genuinely believe she exhibits narcissistic tendencies, has an unhealthy codependency on my sister, and exhibits an obsession with my nephew. I recognize that I will likely never receive an apology for her behavior toward me, and I understand that. However, if she seeks therapy, I promise I will genuinely attempt to improve our relationship. That said, I have little interest in maintaining it as close as it could have been, and that is simply the harsh reality.